Yo, YouTube, we got 10 disturbing internet rabbit holes. Like, comment, subscribe, ground, your new woman.
Golf tip. Back in the early 90s, 1-800 golf tip.
1-800 golf tip.
Back in the early 90s, a mysterious
that.
phone number started popping up on billboards and newspaper ads across North America. It was a vanity number that spelled out 1-800 golf tip.
1-800
Seeing
golf
this,
tip.
most people assumed that it was an innocent golf tips helpline or something of the sort.
True.
However, that couldn't have been further from the truth. When someone did call the number, they were greeted by the sound of a person breathing into his microphone. This was then quickly followed by the same person counting off numbers 1 through 10 in an Indian or Middle Eastern accent over and over again.
Hey,
1, 2, 3,
yo.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3.
This sequence
4.
kept repeating for minutes on
Oh,
end,
song.
leaving many people confused and prompting them to hang up.
2, 3,
4, 5.
However,
8.
this counting didn't last forever. People discovered that after about 10 to 12 minutes, the voice faded into silence and was replaced by static noise.
2, 3, 4,
The
5,
fuck?
6, 7.
But that wasn't all, because the ones who kept on listening were eventually startled by a loud and unsettling siren sound.
The fuck? Bro.
Not only was this extremely creepy, it also left the listener with many unanswered questions, like what was the purpose of this strange counting?
For real.
And why would anyone pay money to advertise this number in the first place? Over the next few years, the 1-800 golf tip number became a modern folktale of sorts. People heard about it through word of mouth, dialed it out of curiosity, and were all met with the same eerie voice. This phenomenon was widespread enough to become one of the earliest internet rabbit holes, as I found mentions of the number dating as far back as 2003. However, the complete lack of information gave rise to a flood of theories attempting to explain the mystery, including one which speculated if 1-800 golf tip had something to do with number stations, which, for those who don't know, are shortwave radio broadcasts of unknown origin. These usually transmit sequences of spoken numbers, tones, or coded messages, often in eerie, mechanical voices.
What the hell?
Many believe they're used by governments to send encrypted instructions to spies in the field. So, according to this theory, the 1-800 golf tip number served a similar purpose.
Oh, shit.
Another theory that many came up with was that this number was a part of a marketing campaign, probably to gather working phone numbers for telemarketing later or as a social experiment to generate hype for an upcoming product. However, none of these theories hold up to scrutiny. For starters, if number stations are indeed used to transmit instructions to spies, their entire purpose is to deliver messages anonymously, leaving no trace of who received them. A purpose that's negated completely if the receiver had to call a phone number that could potentially be traced back to them. On the other hand, the marketing and number collection theories don't hold much weight either. There are far more effective ways to achieve both goals without depending on an unlikely chance of the number spreading through word of mouth and attracting calls from curious people. Ultimately, despite many attempts at uncovering the truth, 1-800 golf tip remained a mystery for nearly 3 decades. That is, until a Reddit user took it upon himself to get to the bottom of it. He spent over 4 years combing through the available leads and gathering personal anecdotes from people who remembered calling this number in their childhood. And as it turns out, the 1-800 golf tip rabbit hole wasn't a viral hoax or a disturbing conspiracy. Instead, it was the result of a simple mistake. You see, back in 1994, the Professional Golfers Association, or PGA, was touring across North America. And in an effort to promote the sport, they set up billboards and purchased ad space in newspapers, listing their golf tip line 1-800 golf tip. However, this line was only meant to be active for 2 days, as evident from this 1994 ad in the Tampa Tribune, which reads, "Golfers nationwide can receive golf tips today and Sunday via a toll-free instruction hotline presented by the PGA of America and USA Today. The hotline, featuring nearly 100 PGA members, is being offered in conjunction for the Tommy Armour PGA Teaching and Coaching Summit in New Orleans. Call 800 Golf Tip. Following the campaign, billboards in low-traffic areas that never received a new ad ended up staying up far longer than intended.
Oh shit.
However, by then, the tip line was replaced by a placeholder test message from the phone company. As for the disturbing siren sound at the end, it was just one of the many pre-recorded tones phone companies used to signal that the call hadn't reached its intended destination. In the end, 1-800-GOLF-TIP wasn't a covert spy line or a clever marketing ploy. It was simply the byproduct of a phone company forgetting to disconnect a test number. And
Wow.
while the truth isn't as thrilling as some might have hoped, it brought closure to those who spent nearly 30 years chasing the mystery.
That was pretty much nothing.
User 927.
User 927.
On August 4th, 2006, AOL, which was an early search engine like Google, released a text file on its website containing 20 million search queries from its users. These queries were collected from over 650,000 users and spanned a period of about 3 months. Whether this release was intentional or simply a private file mistakenly made public remains unclear. The users' actual names were replaced with anonymous filler numbers starting at 1, so like user 34 or user 152, but based solely on each user's searches, you could usually still find out a lot about them. The company did apologize and remove the file 3 days later, but it was already too late. Thousands of people had already copied the file and began combing through it out of curiosity. And while most of the searches were exactly what you'd expect, like users looking for restaurant recommendations, planning vacations, or searching for medical symptoms, user 927's search history stood out from the rest for just how shockingly disturbing it was. It started off quite normal, with user 927 looking up songs from various artists. There were also some medical queries, such as the time it takes for a broken leg to heal and fungal infections, as well as numerous searches on different types of flowers. But it didn't take long for user 927's searches to shift into the realm of deeply inappropriate and not safe for work. Now, due to the explicit nature of these searches, I can't share them on YouTube, but just note that many of them were deeply unsettling and painted a troubling picture of the user behind them. However, this was only the beginning. As the weeks went on, user 927's searches grew darker, more specific, and far more disturbing. It went from looking up questionable stuff to searching for straight-up illegal and harmful material.
What?
The unsettling nature of user 927's search history sparked widespread discussion and concern across the internet, even inspiring an off-Broadway play which delved into themes of cyberstalking, privacy, and the implications of our digital footprints. Despite their infamy, however, user 927 was never identified.
Oh shit, he was never.
All we know is that they were likely from Colorado, based on a single search from the state's official government website. It's also likely that these searches were made on a shared family computer, since they often flip-flopped between wholesome searches and illegal not-safe-for-work searches. Apart from that, the identity of user 927 remains a mystery to this day.
Oh, really?
Google Translate anomalies. Near the end of 2017, a few users on 4chan noticed a bizarre phenomenon with Google Translate, where typing in incoherent and broken strings of characters led to eerily normal-sounding responses.
The fuck?
For instance, typing the letter O and P repeatedly resulted in Google Translate telling the user to click on the image to view more.
What?
Similarly, using P and S instead produced something that resembled a snippet from an email. Now, it would have been easy to write it off as a coincidence, just random characters accidentally forming something familiar, but as more people tested it, the more weirdly consistent the outputs became. Like the Translate app telling the user to go ahead and ask any questions they might have, or in some instances, telling them that they have a chronic disease, a tendency to be infected with the virus, and that they will have a lot of pain. How could a nonsensical mix of characters produce such specific and sometimes threatening translations? At this point, the most reasonable explanation was that this was simply a glitch, perhaps an obscure bug in Google's Translate system. After all, most of these eerie translations occurred specifically when converting between Somali and English, suggesting a potential flaw in how the algorithm handled that language pair. But what made this seem unlikely was the amount of unique information Google Translate was showing in response to these requests, including things like a link to a Facebook post, or what appeared to be an email address. In a similar vein, a few specific combinations also provided results that read like a private conversation between two people, stating things like, "You will be given the opportunity to be re-elected," and "This is a great way for you to come to our country." So, what is going on here? Unfortunately, despite the online interest, Google never acknowledged the problem, so we can only speculate. And while I did come across some wild theories suggesting that Google Translate was somehow a sentient AI trying to communicate outside of its intended purpose, these theories are of course not true. One possible theory is that this was the work of a rogue Google employee, someone who out of frustration or boredom decided to tamper with the system. Maybe they were trying to degrade the app's quality out of spite, or perhaps they simply wanted to leave behind a hidden Easter egg for others to discover. However, someone risking their lucrative career at Google for something this uneventful and niche is fairly hard to justify. From everything I've seen, the most plausible explanation is still the one mentioned earlier, that all of this was just a glitch or an overlooked bug in the system. As for the oddly specific bits of information, those could have come from any number of internal sources. Consider this, massive platforms like Gmail, Google Drive, and Search process billions of data points every day. So it's not hard to imagine a coding error causing Google Translate to inadvertently pull fragments from those interconnected services.
That's crazy.
Which, if true, would be a real security and privacy threat. That said, I tried replicating the troubling prompts myself and came up empty. Whatever was causing the bizarre outputs seems to have been quietly patched out by Google since the story first broke out.
Ooh.
Been an email.
Hey.
Should bring that up in the next one.
Ted the Caver.
Ted the
On
Caver.
March 23, 2001, a man named Ted began sharing his caving experience in an online journal. The story started a few months earlier in December 30th, 2000, when Ted and his friend B were exploring a cave they thought they knew well. But on this particular trip, they found something unexpected, a small hole on a wall near the cave's lowest point. As Ted kneeled down to get a closer look inside, he felt a faint breeze coming from the hole, suggesting there might be an entire unexplored cave system lying just beyond the narrow opening. The excitement of being the first people to explore this new section of the cave outweighed the inherent danger of venturing into the unknown. After surveying the area, Ted and B decided to widen the hole and carve out a passable corridor. About a month later, on the 27th of January, they began to chisel at the rock. But something felt strange. The two felt a suspiciously strong wind coming from the hole, followed by low, ominous rumbling from deep within the cave. They tried to rationalize these occurrences, thinking that the wind was just blowing a little stronger outside, and that the rumbling noise was coming from the trucks driving on the mountain road above the cave. So, despite the noise growing louder and more frequent, they pressed on. A decision they'd come to regret, as the sense of unease kept getting worse, fueled by a series of increasingly disturbing occurrences, like their dog becoming agitated as soon as it reached the cave and refused to go anywhere near the hole, or the two hearing what Ted described as the most terrible scream he has ever heard from the hole, lasting nearly 10 seconds. Once the hole was big enough, Ted crawled through to the other side, only to be met by a massive, unnaturally round boulder sitting in the center of a small chamber. There were also hieroglyph-like drawings on the walls depicting people standing around a strange symbol. He took photos on his disposable Polaroid camera and came back. But when he tried to develop those pictures later that day, every photo he took of the round rock and its surroundings came out completely blank. They then tried recruiting another experienced caver, Joe, hoping a fresh perspective might help. However, Joe returned minutes after he went in, visibly shaken by the experience. He refused to speak about what he saw on the other side, and just stated that he would never enter that hole again. Left with no other choice, Ted decided to explore the new area himself. But as soon as he reached the other side, he began hearing the rock scraping sound again. He panicked and ran for the exit, only to see the round rock in a different position than it originally was. As he crawled through the hole, a nauseating stench began to fill the cave. Then, just as he and B reached the entrance, something tugged on their rope. In a panic, B slashed it with his knife, sending whatever was climbing up crashing back into the darkness. Yet, their story doesn't end there. In his May 19, 2001 update, Ted talked about their plans to go back fully equipped, to solve the mystery and capture definitive proof of the insides with photos and video footage. However, the updates never came, leaving readers to wonder what happened to Ted and B. Now, I should mention that back then, many online communities were skeptical about the authenticity of this story and internet rabbit hole. However, the irregular updates and accompanying photos were convincing enough to make many believe the story was real. But the story was completely fake.
Dang.
Back then, internet creepypastas, or fake horror stories presented as true, weren't really a thing, or at least weren't very common. Many people had no reason not to believe this story. Nowadays, the Ted the Caver story is often referred to as the internet's first creepypasta. In 2004, he joined a discussion about his story on a forum site and admitted he made it up. Apparently, they did explore the cave and actually took the pictures he posted on his journal, but everything about the round boulder, the drawings on the
was a good story.
wall, and the chase at the end was completely fictional. However, none of this detracted from its position as the story that introduced the internet to creepypastas, a genre that's prevalent to this day. The Glitter Conspiracy. On the 21st of December 2018, New York Times posted an article titled, "What is Glitter?" This was supposed to be nothing more than an educational article on what glitter is and where it's used in our day-to-day lives. However, what its author didn't realize at the time was that this would ignite one of the most heavily debated rabbit holes in internet history. It started with an odd conversation between the article's writer and a manager from GlitterX, which is one of the largest glitter manufacturers in the US. When I asked Miss Dyer if she could tell me which industry served as GlitterX's biggest market, her answer was instant. "No, I absolutely know I can't." I was taken aback. "But you know what it is?" "Oh, God, yes," she said and laughed. "You would never guess it. Let's just leave it at that." I asked if she could tell me why she couldn't tell me. "Because they don't want you to know that it's glitter. If I looked at it, I wouldn't know it was glitter."
What?
"Oh, not really. Would I be able to see the glitter?" "Oh, you'd be able to see something, but yeah, I can." The writer then asked if she could tell the buyer's name off record, but she refused completely. Not long after the article went live, someone posted their strange conversation on the Unresolved Mysteries subreddit, sparking a wave of speculation about who this mysterious client could be. One of the top comments under this post pointed towards a potential use by law enforcement as an ID for explosives, reading, "Micro-taggins. Multi-layered micro-glitter added to all commercial explosives. Simple to batch trace on-site after the detonation using only a microscope. Use dynamite for illegal purposes and leave evidence as clear as a fingerprint.
No.
Law enforcement probably don't want this fact circulating." And while this made some logical sense, others leaned toward crazier conspiracy-adjacent theories. Like, this one user claimed that the government spreads glitter on beaches to increase their sparkle and by extension attract more tourists.
No.
A few people also suggested that the mystery buyer could be the US military, since glitter's reflective properties might make it useful for camouflaging equipment by deflecting radar signals. One user proposed a more unsettling theory, that GlitterX's biggest client could be a toothpaste company, using glitter to create the illusion of sparkling clean teeth. While the idea sounds absurd at first, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility given how common microplastics are in personal care products. However, none of these theories hold much merit. Microplastics in personal care products, including toothpastes, were banned back in July 2017, over a year before the New York Times interview. The military contract theory is also completely detached from the truth. In reality, the radar-absorbing coating used for fighter jets is made from iron and ferrite, not shiny plastics. So, while these theories were fascinating to sift through, none of them actually answered the one question that started it all. Who was buying all the glitter? This remained a mystery for almost an entire year before someone managed to uncover the truth.
Oh.
On the 8th of November 2019, the Endless Thread podcast dropped an episode titled The Great Glitter Mystery, and this had the answer people were looking for. Apparently, the answer was boat manufacturers. This might sound odd at first, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you consider the shimmering, reflective paint used on many newer boats.
Oh yeah.
As for why GlitterX might be so secretive about the identity of their biggest client, one plausible reason could be environmental concerns. Glitter, especially the traditional kind made from microplastics, has been heavily criticized for its contribution to pollution, particularly in oceans where it can be harmful to marine life. So if it came out that companies were using it in boat paint and releasing untold amounts of microplastics into the ocean, it could spark public backlash or calls for regulation. In the end, the truth behind the glitter conspiracy was a lot more mundane than secret military contracts or explosive detection, leaving many to express their disappointment online.
I mean, it's still pretty bad. What the fuck? Why would they use glitter on boats?
Polybius is the name of a rumored arcade game that had a limited release in 1981 and has since been lost to time. As the story goes,
I'm going like,
bye, have a great time.